it's Julian, and today I'm going to be answering a question that I get asked a lot, which is how to get your tracks signed to bigger labels. I just released a track on Umex label 1605. The track is called T4T9. I've got the link to it at the top of the description. And I'm going to talk to you guys just about some things I learned on my journey to get to this point of, releasing tracks on labels consistently and being able to get releases and just sort of understanding the game. I think there's a lot of secrets that people don't really talk about on the internet. This is definitely one of the things that gets talked about last, but today I'm going to be spilling the beans. So yeah, like I said in the beginning, definitely go check out my new record, T4T9. I'm really proud of this track, guys. I've been sitting on this one for a minute. It's definitely one of my favorite tracks I've ever made, and I'm really excited to be able to share it with you guys now. Link to that is at the top of the description. If you enjoy my videos, it's a really great way to support me. And yeah, so the first thing that I think is really important when you're trying to get your track signed by any label, but especially like a bigger label, is you just need to make good tracks. Like, there's just no way around it. You have to make the best possible version of what you do in the best possible way, presented great, great sounds, very high quality songwriting, very high quality like low end and bass. Everything has to be there. Like, every aspect of the track has to be great. It has to have great melody, great just sort of concept, great percussion, great kick, great bass line. All that kind of stuff is going to come together. If any link in the chain is weak, the whole track is off, you know what I mean? So you really have to make sure that your tracks are not just like kind of like a good idea, but they're really professional. Really check with reference tracks and check and make sure like your low end is fat enough, make sure your percussion's fat enough, make sure that you have, something that fits in the style as well. I think a lot of times, someone will just make like a tech house track, and, across like the genre of tech house, a lot of different labels have pretty different sounds. It's like, you can make like a tech house track that will work really well on, say, Tool Room, but then it's not going to work well at all on Repopulate Mars. Like, it could be a great track, but Repopulate Mars just isn't going to sign something that has all that percussion in it, and vice versa. And that can go with anything. So it's important, to make really good tracks and make tracks that are going to fit into the style and fit with what the label is. And that's my second point here, is, you have to be realistic about that. You have to be realistic about what is going to fit on the label and really pay attention to their previous releases. Like, don't just make a techno track and say, okay, every techno label is going to sign this. Or same deal like what I just said with the tech house. Because, it's like a track that like would get signed on 1605, for example, may not get signed on Kraftek or Drum Code. Or a track that gets signed on Drum Code probably won't get signed on those other labels I mentioned. So it's like, you really have to just be realistic about like the track if it fits on that label, and that label specifically, because it's like, at the end of the day, like, they're getting a ton of different demos, They're getting demos from people that are literally just sending in copies of tracks that they've already released. So it's like, if anything, you may have a great track, but it kind of would make more sense for them to go with one of those copies if your track isn't going to fit with their style, because it's just like, they have to stick to their aesthetic. That's the whole point of a label. So you really need to be realistic about that with yourself. And I think it comes down to a few things, I think for one, just really understanding the style and really only pursuing labels that you truly love and connect with deeply. It's like, you can't just make a track and then say, I'm going to send this to all these different tech house labels. Instead, you have to say, okay, I really like this style of tech house, or I really like this style of techno, or I really like this style of minimal house, whatever it is. And once you choose that style, like, really hone in on that, rather than just trying to make something and then say, oh, I'm just going to send it to every different techno label. And yeah, and then that kind of goes into my next point here. I got my list of ideas about this. Is, you got to make tracks with the label in mind. I think that's really the best thing that you can do, is like, look at it realistically. Like, maybe, let's say this is your first release, so you're not maybe going to release on like the biggest labels or whatever, but pick a few smaller labels, check out that are really high quality, of course, that have tracks that you really like, and just check out their releases and really get an idea of like sort of the language they're speaking, so to speak, if that makes any sense. Like, a good example of this would be like Drum Code, for example, is like maybe between 126 and 130 BPM, fat rumble kicks, nothing too crazy or distorted, usually some cool sound design with the lead or something like that that's going to make it really catchy and memorable. And like, you can start to kind of like define these things for any label that you want to send your tracks to, or that you want to hopefully get released on, and you really need to do that and like yeah, just really analyze what they seem to like. And it helps too, of course, you know, if you send demos a few times and you get some feedback, and like they tell you, oh, well, I like really simple tracks, or I like tracks that have like a lot of extra effects, or whatever it may be, you can kind of like sort of take that back to your track making. And I know to some people this may kind of feel like, oh, well, you're just sort of like, you know, putting yourself out there and just doing somebody else's vision. Like, you should always do your own vision. And that is true, but the way I view it is more so like you are doing your own vision within this sort of like rule set of things that this label is going to take. You know, it's like, okay, so you know the label likes really simple tracks, you know they like big cosmic techno melodies, and you know that they like not too much percussion. So, you know, those, if you were going to make a track that had, you know, a very complex melody, tons of percussion, and tons of layers, then yeah, that doesn't really align with your vision. But if you tell yourself, okay, so I can't do the 20 layers of percussion in this track, I can't do, you know, the crazy classical lead, let me just do it really simple, then you're channeling yourself through that lens, you know, like, that way it's not so much like just saying, okay, I'm just going to make a Repopulate Mars track, or a drum code track, or whatever, and it's more so like, let me make a Julian O track, or let me make, you know, whatever your artist name is, let me make that, like, what that would sound like on this label, if that makes any sense. That's really how you have to do it, is like, make tracks with the label, or labels in mind. You know, usually you could have like 2 or 3 that you could probably put into the same sort of box of vibes and how they sound. And then just sort of channel your own creativity and do what really feels natural to you, but sort of through the lens of the things that you know that label is going to sign. And yeah, I just, you know, I think like it seems again like you're sort of making the track for like a certain purpose rather than just making it for free artistic expression. But like, you know, at the end of the day, you are really truly expressing yourself. It's just kind of through a different rule set than you might be used to. And you know, this can also help you too. It's like you get a lot of really good ideas when you sort of step outside of your box. Like maybe the things that you think are like entirely just what you have to do in every track to make it sound like you, those things might be holding you back. You know, you might try to make a track that's going to fit on a certain label, and it might be kind of different from, you know, the rules you usually adhere to, but then you find actually that helps your process better. That has definitely happened to me a ton of times. Like, I can't even begin to tell you. And yeah, and then the other thing that I think is important to keep in mind here is be ready to send lots and lots and lots of demos. And when I say lots and lots and lots, I really mean like a ton of demos. Like, you guys would really be surprised. Like, a lot of times when you hear somebody's debut on a certain label, like you hear somebody just got, you know, their first release on Drum Code or Kraftek or Terminal M or like any of these kind of bigger labels, a lot, like, it wasn't just the first track that they sent. Like, it just doesn't happen that way. It wasn't like somebody just gets like Adam Bader's email and then just says like, sends them one track and then that's it, like right there. That's the track he wants to take. Usually when you see that, those people have been sending these labels tracks for months and months and months, sometimes even years. I've heard a lot of stories where people were literally sending tracks for 2 years, and then finally, after 2 years of just constantly sending tracks to somebody, one of them was one that the label owner liked. So yeah, you just really need to be ready to do that. Like, don't get too married to or obsessed with any one track. Definitely be open to the idea that, you know, these tracks you're making right now might not be the ones that are going to get signed, but they are going to get you, one, you're going to get better at making tracks. Just every time you make a track, you get better at making tracks. Like, that's just how it works. And two, you know, maybe it'll work great on some other label at some point. Like, maybe you'll have a collection of ones that are left that didn't get signed by this label, and then later on you might get a chance to send some tracks to another label and they might fit with that one. So it's like, you know, even if you're sending a lot of stuff and it's, you know, like, most of it isn't getting signed, like they really end up taking like 1 or 2 tracks out of, let's say you sent them 50 tracks, you still have those other 48 tracks that you can hold on to for different things. You can play them out yourself when you're DJing and just have like really exclusive stuff to play, you know. I think there's a lot of validity, even if you make like a lot of stuff that doesn't end up getting signed. Like, trust me, I have sent so many tracks to labels. Like in the case of this one I'm talking about right now, T14-9, I sent a ton of tracks along with that to Umek, and I sent, you know, over a few months I was sending him a lot of tracks, and ultimately this is the one that worked out really well and that he wanted to take. And it's like, you know, if I had just stopped after the first like 2 demos I sent him or something and said, oh, this guy's never going to play my tracks, this guy's never going to support me, I wouldn't have this release right now. So it's like you have to really just be willing to get told no a lot of times, but it's not no, never. We're never going to sign your track and you suck and you're horrible. It's just no to those specific tracks. It's just that those ones didn't line up with what the label owner or whoever you're sending it to, the label manager, all that wanted out of the label. It just didn't line up with that. And, you know, you just have to be able to kind of separate your ego from your tracks. And I think that is going to help you. And yeah, so that is pretty much it for this one, guys. Like I said, I just wanted to give you a ton of tips that I picked up on from sending all these tracks to labels, getting releases, and hopefully getting more releases in the future and stuff. Too, you know, it can be a bit of a grueling process, but if you adhere to these rules, which are pretty much common sense if you think about it, like make good tracks, you know, make tracks that fit the label, be willing to send lots of demos. These are all pretty simple things, but if you can just kind of like overcome that mental game and get through it and keep doing it, I guarantee you, you will have some tracks on some really great labels. And yeah, thank you so much, guys. Like I said in the beginning, definitely go check out my new track, T149, at the top of the description. Just dropped on 1605, one of my favorite techno tracks I've ever made. I'm really excited for you guys to hear this one. And also check out my sample packs at the top of the description, too. If you guys enjoy all these tutorials that I make, definitely go support me there. All the sample packs are just like $5 or $10, but it's a really great way to support me and keep me going so I can keep bringing you guys tips like this that aren't on YouTube anywhere else. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.